Hello and welcome to another great episode of the Gridiron Glory, where we're here to bring you great coverage of all 32 teams all season long. Right now, we got the Chargers and the Panthers. 26-3, the final score was. Tad, the Carolina Panthers. What's going on with them as a franchise?
Yeah, 2015, you win the Super Bowl. Well, you go to the Super Bowl and you lose in the Super Bowl. Since then, 2018, you have David Tepper come on as the new owner, one of the worst owners in sports the past 5 years. And obviously, the latest thing he's done is you make this big acquisition with trading for the number one draft pick. You give away many franchise players, many draft capital, and you use it to draft who you see as your franchise quarterback, Bryce Young. Obviously, the numbers speak for themselves with Bryce Young, and it's not all his fault, but he's done nothing to elevate the team that is horribly built around him. We know the state of the Carolina Panthers. Their offensive line, arguably the worst in the league. Their receiving unit, they're doing what they can to build up their receiving unit, but it's nothing special. No offense to the players. They have some solid receivers. Adam Thielen is solid, but he's no longer a number one receiver. Deontay Johnson is a respectable receiver, but he's not a number one receiver. You draft Leggett out of South Carolina, and he can build into a good receiver, but he's not there yet. In the backfield, you have guys like Chuba Hubbard, Miles Sanders, and those are guys that are good pieces, but they're not a number one running back. So on offense, you don't have elite skill players. You have nothing at the offensive line. And now, yeah, you bring in Dave Canales, who's doing what he can to build a culture. He's trying his best in his first year as a head coach, but now he's made the decision to bench Bryce Young, and that's his first big decision as a head coach in the NFL. Draft your guy who I would imagine, and this is somewhat speculation, but I'd imagine this is what happened when they hired Dave Canales. They said, Dave, your job here is to come and make Bryce Young the best quarterback he can be. Do what you can to coach up this guy. He's our franchise guy. And then 2 games into the season, you pull the plug there. There's some questions there. Obviously, his performance, it wasn't good. 18 for 26, 84 yards, no touchdowns, 1 interception. It's been a brutal start to the year for Bryce Young. There's no denying that. And now the question is, what do they do for the future on this offense? There's a lot of question marks there. You're going to go in the short term with Andy Dalton. Is this going to give a chance for Bryce Young to sit on the bench and maybe develop out of the spotlight? I don't know. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen with Bryce Young in Carolina. It's possible he started his last game for the Panthers. Obviously, that would be a disastrous outcome for everyone involved for the Panthers. But it's possible that they've just completely pulled the plug on the Bryce Young project after 18 games, which would be very disappointing when you give up all you give up to get the number one pick.
I remember when this happened to a number of different quarterbacks. Geno Smith, Geno Smith is at a rough road in the NFL.
Yeah.
But look at him now. He's a starter for the Seattle Seahawks. So I don't want to sit here and necessarily say that this is like the end of Bryce Young's NFL career by any means. I'm just saying that maybe perhaps Bryce Young might need to take a season or two, maybe 2 or 3, to develop on the bench, develop as a backup. And I mean, maybe he can develop into a starting quarterback one day. Or even perhaps, I mean, I don't mean like a disrespect by it, but I mean, I feel like he would make a very solid starting like UFL quarterback, perhaps.
Yeah, and I mean, when you have a guy like Bryce Young, I'd really like to see how he would look in a system that isn't in the state of Carolina.
Like even as a backup in another system.
David Tepper and this Carolina franchise, they've gone completely off the rails with just how poorly built they are, how poorly ran they are. And I don't mean to completely rag on the Panthers, but because their fan base, they had a good fan base.
I do. Yeah. I mean, let's
They
talk about just how honorable
definitely
the loyalty of the
had
fan base
a
is.
quality fan base, and they were a fan base that they were ready to get behind a team to like they really got behind the Cam Newton era, and even after that, like the slogan "Keep Pounding" and all that, really beautiful story behind that and all. But when it comes to the Carolina Panthers, just David Tepper has just zapped all the excitement out of Carolina, and now it's just one difficult game after the other, and it's like they're not even remotely competitive. They haven't been remotely competitive this year. I mean, the games are over by halftime. You just know you're not going to get anything from their offense and their defense. They do what they can on occasion, but I mean, especially with Derek Brown on the injury reserve, it's tough, and they do what they can. I mean, you got the guys out there; they're doing what they can to compete. You got guys like Josie Jewell getting 11 tackles, Shaq Thompson, probably the best player on the defense, 14 tackles, 8 solo. So I mean, you got guys out there that are doing what they can to compete, but in the end, and a guy like J.C. Horn getting an interception, stuff like that. But
I mean, there are players out there that are trying to do their jobs and trying to do it the best way that they can. It's just not a well organized team, and
yeah,
this is a young coach who is learning so much,
I
and
think that
a lot's being thrown. I want to just say that this head coach is learning so much, and a lot is being thrown at him.
when I look at the Carolina Panthers, I think that I mean, obviously, like the players, they're responsible for their own efforts and their own results. But at the end of the day, I see the failure with the Carolina Panthers way more with the upper management than with the coaching and the players.
Like this is on the front office, really.
Absolutely. This is on the
The
front office,
ownership.
the ownership. Like I said, and I've said it before, I think David Tepper is the worst owner in the NFL, perhaps the worst owner in professional sports. So yeah, that's
I'm sure
my
there'd be a
take
lot of
on
Panthers fans that would listen to this and agree with you.
yeah. And I mean, to the Panthers fans, like I have a lot of respect for you guys for trying to keep the faith with this organization, and it could be a while before it gets better, but just do what you can. Football is still a beautiful game, but it's tough. Like I acknowledge that it's tough.
I mean, yeah. Even I mean, I've definitely have endured some tough seasons as a Denver fan. I know your Vikes have tag, so
Yeah. And
I
like
mean,
we've been through some bad times, but I feel like just
what
the
Panthers fans
level
are dealing with,
the
it's
level
tough.
of disgust and the level of like poor play, like I've never seen something like this in the NFL. I mean, my Vikings have had some bad seasons. We've had some like 3-13 seasons, but at least more often than not, we're competitive. The Panthers right now, they're not even competitive. They don't even have a hope to win a game. Some games,
And that's not like out of a disrespect. It's just
right?
it's not set up well to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Like the organization itself and the franchise itself is not set up to succeed right now.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't. We mentioned it in a lot of off-air talk about like cognitive plans for like franchises like the Cardinals, the Giants, the Broncos. Um, I mean, what's the cognitive plan for the
Yeah,
Panthers?
what's the plan for the Panthers? I mean, are you going to completely reset again? Do you know what you're going to do? Do you know if there's any players on this team that are actually planning on being a part of your future? Do you have a future? Like, I don't know. I don't know any of their plans. I think the best plan for the Carolina Panthers would be to completely clean house and start at the top.
Right on. Now said about the Carolina Panthers. Let's talk about the winning side of this football game. The Los Angeles Chargers now 2-0. Jim Harbaugh 2-0 as the Chargers head coach.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the LA Chargers, and I mean, you have a lot of big stories with the Chargers with the return of Harbaugh to the NFL with Justin Herbert getting healthy. But I think the most beautiful story, one of the most beautiful stories in the NFL, you look at a guy like J.K. Dobbins, what he's done
Yes.
coming off of his major injuries. He's leading the league in rushing. He has 266 yards on the season, first in the league, had 17 carries for 131 yards and a touchdown, 7.7 yards per carry. And he's just had an incredible season. And I think it's great to see him rebound from the many multitude of injuries he's had over the past 2-3 years. And now he's coming to a team that is surprising some with their performance. I'm certainly surprised. I did not expect to be talking about a 2-0 Chargers team, but here we are. And J.K. Dobbins has been the best player on the offense. I mean, no disrespect to guys like Justin Herbert, but J.K. Dobbins has just been otherworldly the first 2 games of the year.
Oh yeah, and fantasy owners are certainly really happy about it, right? I mean, I personally had Gus Edwards on my fantasy team for this one, and I mean, Tad and I, little side note here, played each other in our fantasy football league, which we co-commission and run. Something we've been doing for a while, but yeah, we were playing each other, and I picked up Gus Edwards because I believe that was because Christian McCaffrey went on IR, was declared on IR, and then so I needed a running back, so I picked up Gus Edwards, and 59 yards, not bad on 18 carries, but it wasn't enough to beat you in fantasy because you took the win. And for what it's also worth, folks, I drafted Christian McCaffrey, and I had the second overall pick in the draft, and he hasn't played one snap of football for my team, so
yeah,
tough the storyline of my franchise right now in fantasy football, but nonetheless, Gus, I do want to just shout out to Gus Edwards. He did solid enough as well.
Mm-hmm.
The Chargers defense has massively improved, and I don't want to leave them out whatsoever. I mean, let's talk about some of the men on the defensive side of the football, like Deion Henley, 6 solo tackles, a tackle for loss. You got guys like, of course, probably the best player on the defense, Joey Bosa. A solo tackle, a sack, and also a tackle for loss, and also a hit on the quarterback. What is your take on Joey Bosa as a football player? Just his style, what he can do. When you read the name Joey Bosa and look at Joey Bosa, what do you think about a guy like that? I mean, he's a guy that can do what?
Yeah, Joey Bosa, he's one of the premier defensive players in the league. I mean, he's easily a top 10 defensive at his position for sure, arguably overall in the league too defensively. But yeah, he's a guy that he's been the leader on this defense, and I mean it's a defense that's full of leaders now. Yeah, they got guys like Poona Ford, Khalil Mack, and this is a defense that can make plays. Denzel Perriman.
Khalil Mack, I mean, obviously past his prime, but would you say he's still a solid enough contributor on that defensive line for the LA Chargers?
Yeah, and he can play on the defensive line. He can play linebacker snaps. He's a guy that's very versatile, very good at what he does. Like you said, not in his prime, but still a player that is a very productive player.
Also worth noting, Elijah Molden with an interception. He's extremely solid. And then, yeah, just an all-around sound game of football for the Los Angeles Chargers as they beat the Carolina Panthers 26-3. Next week coming up for the Chargers, they will be playing at the Pittsburgh Steelers 2-0 and 2-0, and the Carolina Panthers will be playing the Las Vegas Raiders on the road. So stay tuned on the Gridiron Glory podcast. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe all season long, where we cover all 32 teams.